Hello and welcome to the latest Celtic transfer special. This will be the last show before deadline day on Monday, and it's a tale of two strikers, a new top target for Celtic and lots of rumours as well about one of the key men right now in the hoops. And after long last, a player has been linked for months, years upon whatever. He's now here. But let's start off straight away. We've also not long heard from Brendan Rodgers. Kasper Dolberg, he's the new top target.
Yeah, he is. But for Celtic, 100%. Ryan, we had the story on, what day is it now? It's been a long week. Thursday night, that Celtic are keen on Kasper Dolberg. Big admirers of him. They could move for him if ADAMANT leaves for Swansea City, who are the front runners to sign him. We are talking here maybe 10 minutes after Brendan Rodgers has done his press conference on Friday, and he's adamant that, if you pardon the pun, ADAMANT will not be going until Celtic get a replacement. And so, as you started off the show by saying it's a tale of two strikers, both deals are very much intertwined. Celtic like Kasper Dolberg and would, if they are going to sell ADAMANT, would like him to replace ADAMANT. However, it all has to fit into place. According to Brendan Rodgers, nobody will be leaving until he gets a replacement in.
Kasper Dolberg, then, if we dial in on him first of all, what would he bring to Celtic? The profile, I mean, this is a guy that's 27 years old, so a bit more like the age Kyogo was when he came.
Yeah, I think he's just a very good footballer. If you can look at stats and everything, and all the data and everything that's flying about just now, and you know what's his best attributes, etc. I think he's just a good player with a really good pedigree. He's got 55 caps for Denmark in a period where Denmark have been very good. He's played for Ajax, Sevilla, Nice, now Anderlecht. He scored 24 goals last season. He's got 5 in 8 games for that Anderlecht this season. As you say, he's 27, will turn 28 relatively soon. When he was at Ajax as a kid, he was the next big thing.
Yep,
he was tipped to be anything he wanted to be. I think his career, I think it's fair to say, his career maybe stalled after a couple of years at Ajax. He ended an illness. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I think that before that was kind of diagnosed, that maybe held him back slightly. But he's clearly a very good footballer, and at Anderlecht he's found a home. Really, he's, Belgian league's a good league, probably similar to Scotland in many ways. He's been very good for Anderlecht. The fans love him, the club love him. By all accounts, he loves playing there. However, Anderlecht have a bit of money problems. They've spent a bit of money this summer. They need to recoup some. They were hoping to get European football. They're now out. Even the Conference League, they don't have European football. And it's clear, speaking to some colleagues in Belgium over the last couple of days, that they need to sell. And Kasper Dolberg is one of their biggest assets. And I think it's pointing to the fact that they will be willing to do business at a certain level, which is looking around £8.5 million, around that area. So you can understand looking at his CV why Celtic like him. You can understand looking at his price and experience and everything Celtic like him. It just remains to be seen how this all falls into place with ADAMANT.
Yeah, and again, just before we move on to ADAMANT then, someone like Dolberg coming in at this stage of his career, is this a sort of change in tact from the board? Because this isn't necessarily a player that we'll be able to sell on for a profit. Yeah. This is the type of player that's more of that win now, act now mentality.
Yeah, but I sometimes think you can't just always sign projects. I mean, we have spoken so much over these shows about Celtic projects and the profile and everything. I get all that, but see, sometimes you just need to go and get a good player. Sometimes you just need to go and get someone who'll improve your team.
You drew an allegory to Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink.
Yeah, I remember when Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink came in, and at that stage Celtic were actually kind of changing their transfer strategy, and he was almost a bit of a departure from that. Holland international at the time, playing for PSV, real good pedigree. It was a decent fee at the time, 3.54 million. And he was a guy that Gordon Strachan basically identified, Gordon Strachan and his scouts at the time, identified as being, oven ready. He'll come in, he'll make a big impact. And that's what he did. I mean, Jan Vennegoor Hesselink was a great player for Celtic, both in Scotland and in Europe. And I look at Dolberg as a kind of similar, I'm not saying he's similar in style, but just a kind of similar profile, similar age, similar experience. And, it doesn't really surprise me in that specific key position that if the chance comes to get a player of his pedigree for a relatively affordable sum, okay, it's quite high, but it's more than affordable, especially if you're getting money in, if this all works out the way it could, then you can understand why Celtic are going for him.
Yep, so Celtic fans, let us know in the comments, are you excited by Kasper Dolberg? Have you started watching the YouTube highlights of him already? As you said, this is intertwined into Adam Idah's future as well. I do wonder if a bit of Brendan Rodgers' sort of categorical, I'm not letting anybody know if he's going or not, plays into a little bit of the old firm on Sunday. But the main thing is, he's been as firm can be. And he's also probably thinking about what happened with Kyogo.
Well, I was going to say that. I mean, you're spot on to say that. The Kyogo thing, Brendan Rodgers still claims to be searching for a Kyogo replacement. So yeah, I can totally understand, because until a deal is done, then you're never 100% sure. So I think Celtic sold Kyogo in January. Brendan Rodgers thought that we got a replacement, and it never happened. But it was workable, because they still had Adam Idah, and they still had Dyson, Maeda and Jota had come in, and Celtic still had numbers. But if you've only really got a couple of strikers, if you're classing Dyson, Maeda as a striker, Adam Idah is probably in Celtic's strongest team right now, would start as number 9. So I can understand why Brendan Rodgers is saying, look, you can go, but I need a replacement in first. I think he's probably been scarred by what happened in January. So it's up to Celtic's recruitment team and everything to get a deal in place. Kasper Dolberg is a top target. If they can't attain him, they need to get someone else. But the clock's obviously ticking. When we're speaking here on Friday, Celtic have only got to Monday. They've got a big, massive game in between as well. But you can understand why Brendan Rodgers wants this to happen. However, when deals are intertwined, it's complicated, because Celtic probably aren't going to sign Kasper Dolberg unless Adam Idah leaves. So, and likewise, Swansea want Adam Idah, but it all has to fit into place. I don't want to get down the homeowner stuff, but it's like being in a chain, and the chains sometimes fall down. And I suppose it's at what stage does it all, the timing of it all, prove to be right for all three parties, I suppose, involved in this. Time will tell. But look, I think what's clear is that Brendan Rodgers didn't say today Adam Idah's not for sale. He basically said, look, there's a lot of negotiations going on, there's a lot of stuff going on, and we know Swansea are interested in him. We know Swansea are very keen to take him. So I don't think Brendan Rodgers is going to stand in his way. However, the timing has to be right for him and Celtic.
The interest from Swansea, at least probably to most people, has sort of came out of nowhere. The interest from Swansea and Adam Idah. There's no concrete, no one really knows what fee is would eventually end up being. We think it might be slightly short of what's been reported some places elsewhere.
It's probably going to be in excess of 6 in terms of a fee if it happens with add-ons and everything else built in.
Would that be good value if it goes through?
I think so, yeah. Look, to me, he is much maligned, and look, he's not, since the start of the season, Adam Idah's not had a great start to the season, and people will criticise him last year. Actually felt 20 goals for was a good return for him last season. He didn't start the season first choice, he didn't end the season first choice, still scored 20 goals. I never felt he got a run of games. He's quite a streaky striker, he goes through spells of scoring goals, and it maybe didn't work for him. I don't think he is a player who necessarily suits playing against really defensive teams. I think the Championship really suits him, because there's a lot more space to run, and both teams normally have a go in the Championship, whereas at Celtic he was maybe asked to play a bit of a different game. I definitely think there's aspects of his game he can brush up on, hold up play, all that sort of stuff. However, I think Celtic probably paid a bit too much for him last summer, maybe. But I've said it before.
It's a going rate for Championship
striker. It's an international striker at a very young age. Resale value, all that, when Celtic signed him, coming off the back of a really good spell at Celtic, so that's just a going rate really, I suppose. I think if you're taking a little bit of a hit, then it's fair value. But I think the fact that Brendan Rodgers, we'll go over it again, is willing to let him go, providing a replacement in, shows that he's maybe thinking, look, it's probably not worked out as well as he'd hoped and as the player had hoped. Swansea, under Alan Sheehan, new owners, Alan Sheehan, an Irishman who's fully aware of Adam Idah's credentials and qualities and everything. They've got new owners. But clearly, looking at some of the reports down there, they want a sort of target man striker. They want a kind of a focal point. So you can maybe understand why they've looked at a guy who has got a kind of record in the Championship before, has got international caps and has had a decent scoring record at Celtic, and thinking, look, let's have a bit of that. So, look, it remains to be seen. It's clearly one that Idah is keen on, otherwise he'd have blocked it. It's one that Swansea are keen on, and that Celtic aren't going to stand in the way. But come back to it, it's all about getting this replacement then.
Yep, so Celtic fans, let us know how you feel about this move, you know, on both sides. And indeed, Michel-Ange Balikwisha, he's finally here, and now the big question is, does he go straight into the starting 11 against Rangers?
I think he does. I genuinely think he does. I just think you looked at Celtic during the week, and over the two legs actually against Kairat Almaty, they were never really bothered. I know that Kairat had the goal disallowed and a couple of kind of close shaves in the first leg. Second leg, I think Celtic defensively were pretty sound over two legs. The problem for me was a lack of guile, lack of creativity in the final third. Look, Celtic in the end should have scored a goal. They should have got the winner in Kazakhstan. They didn't. They paid the price in the penalty shootouts. But they need a spark in attack. They need someone to just bring a bit of flair, to play with a bit of freedom. I think far too much has been asked of Daisen Maeda, Yang and James Forrest in the last couple of weeks. Because if you look at Brendan Rodgers, especially since the 5 subs get introduced, he normally uses 6 attackers. He likes to freshen up his attack, both from the start and during games. You know, if you're a wing at Celtic, you'll play 60 one week, you'll maybe play 30 next week. But he's asking a lot of guys. There's a lot of shuffling about going on. So to me, Balikwisha, you know, I remember a lot of players on both sides coming in for Old Firm debuts and really shining. Maybe it's because they can play with, they don't really know what to expect. They're just going in. The key thing for this is sometimes when you get a summer transfer, you find a player has not been playing, not been in action, not done a pre-season. But Michel-Ange Balikwisha has been playing. He's done a full pre-season. He's fully injury-free after some disruption the last couple of seasons. And you can just imagine him. I mean, if you say to him, do you want to go and start at Ibrox in a game where Celtic could potentially go 9 points ahead and go and be a hero straight away, I think he'll want it. So I would expect him to probably start, to be perfectly honest with you. And just to go back to it, we have spoken about him more than, I know there probably won't be a lot of Celtic fans out there watching the Rangers videos, but it's been Conor Cody and Michel-Ange Balikwisha have been the double act, they've been the stars of these videos.
Yep. I remember you
finally
saying,
we've got one.
I was going to say, I remember you saying that you were going to pay some of your own money to get this done, so how much out of pocket are you?
50p. but we also did say a couple of weeks ago that he would be a Celtic player.
Yep, no, you did.
I think it was you that said it? I can't remember. One of you said it.
I'm pretty sure it was you. I'll give you the credit.
I think the phrase is manifested. It happened.
So the other thing that then Celtic fans will hope we manifest is this second winger, because you have said all along that Celtic don't need just one, they need two.
Yeah, they need two.
Jacob Braham, that's maybe cooled off slightly. Calvin Stengs, who maybe more of a midfielder who could play wide anyway, he's off to Pisa. But this lad Tounekti is the latest one, and apparently Celtic have made a bid. Reports from Belgium suggest
it's coming. Yeah, it's coming from. I think if you recall, and this comes back to this transfer window feels endless. We had a story that Celtic were scouting Hammarby versus Charleroi, both legs.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago. Subsequent to that, I think there was a story that Celtic had looked at the Hammarby centre-half, Eriksson, his name was. We asked Brendan Rodgers about him, and he said, I'm not in the market for another centre-half. So it then got us thinking, given that Celtic had been at 2 Hammarby games in quick succession, who could they be looking at? And I think we did a piece online, Ryan, about Yusuf Arabi and I think Sebastian Tounekti at that time. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, it transpires that Celtic are very keen on Tounekti. And some of my Swedish colleagues that I know very well are very switched on over there, really good, and are adamant that Celtic have made an opening bid of over 2 million, it's about 2.5 million. And now, just in the last half hour before we come in, that they've now pretty much doubled that. So it's around about, I think it's in the kind of region of about 4 million, just less than double. And it's now a decision for Hammarby. Again, I think the player will be keen to come. He was playing, I mean, he only signed for Hammarby at the start of the season. So it started this year. He was at Hogestad before that. Tunisia Cat, I think he's Norwegian born. Can play in either flank, probably more comfortable off the left. And to me, it looks like a player who, if Celtic do follow through this interest, and as I said, there's guys I know in Sweden are saying there are bids in, that maybe Celtic are looking at him as one who, if you don't act now, you might miss the boat with him, because Hammarby have been a bit of a kind of success story in Sweden this year, and I think he's been getting really, really kind of rave reviews. And again, you look at the data and people might say, oh, but he's only got X amount of assists, he's only got 2 Tunisia caps and stuff like that. But I think the scouts, and it's not just Celtic, there's been a lot of European clubs looking at him thinking he could be the next one to really kind of explode onto the scene. Time will tell if that's the case. Time will tell if Celtic can probably follow it through and, you know, do enough or offer enough to see if Hammarby will accept it. But the player was, you know, I love in Sweden how they don't, you know, stop players from talking about these things. He was straight out at training yesterday, and everybody's asking him about Celtic, and he basically did the usual. I'm very flattered, big European club, it shows him doing very, very well. So I think he would be interested in coming if Celtic can get that one done. And it just feeds into what we've been saying. Celtic need wingers. They need options in that final third. You know, Jota will be coming back in 2026 from that injury, but you know, we know Nicholas Kuhn, Marco Tillio's gone, Luke Palmer's gone. Fair enough, they weren't really contributing, but there was still bodies in there. So Celtic, as I said, they need bodies in there, and Tounekti looks like one who would fit into the kind of Celtic profile that we usually see.
Yep, I said reports in Belgium there. We've been talking about Balikwisha that much. I meant reports in Sweden. So the next one, so at the same time as the interest in, the kind of Balikwisha being a done deal, when that started to become apparent, we had the fullback Sirachi from Boca Juniors was also believed to be at a similar pace. Where are we with that one just now?
Yeah, he trained Friday. He trained with Celtic. Brendan Rodgers confirmed he trained. He went through his physical test. He trained with the team. Celtic, as we speak just now, hadn't confirmed it, but I think that one will get done. He is arriving from Boca. I think it's a season-long loan. I'm not sure if there's an obligation or a buy option or whatever it is. Again, pretty experienced. You know, if you're looking for someone, I think, you know, he's played for Uruguay, 27, played a lot of big clubs, RB Leipzig and stuff like that. A very kind of not a strange, a well-travelled player.
Journeyman.
Yeah, but loads of experience. You know, he played in the Club World Cup for Boca during the summer as well. So he can play left back. So I think everybody's naturally looking at it at him as kind of cover for Kieran Tierney as he kind of gradually builds his fitness back. But talking to someone, he can also play right back, which is interesting given that Celtic, you know, Tony Ralston was the one that was going to step in with Alistair Johnson injury, but he picked up an injury obviously in Kazakhstan. I think he's maybe touch and go for the weekend, according to Brendan Rodgers, touch and go for Sunday. So Sirachi can play there as well. So he offers Celtic cover, both full-back positions. He is a left-back traditionally, but I think it's one that Celtic needed a body in there. They need somebody to cover left. If he can cover right, even better. I just wonder, you know, experienced guy, I don't think anything, you know, he'd be daunted by getting in at Ibrox and playing some part of the game. I just wonder if he's fit enough, whether he does get thrown in at some point.
Yeah, imagine if he's played in a Boca River derby, then the Glasgow derby might be toffee to him. So before we go to maybe some of the outgoings, just a quick recap on what was a disappointing week in the Champions League for Celtic. It's been spoke ad nauseum about the current state of the squad, if you like, and I suppose, should the squad as it stood have beaten Kairat Almaty over 2 legs?
100%. Look, you can. There's been a blame game going on, and for a while this week you're thinking people are trying to take opposite sides, and it's the players' fault, and it's Brendan Rodgers' fault, or it's the board's fault, and everything. Look, you can apportion blame, as we said last week. You can apportion blame to both. Celtic underperformed on the pitch over 2 legs, 210 minutes, failed to score a goal against a very limited side. Organised, better than I thought they would be, but Celtic should be beating them and had enough chances to beat them, and then lost the penalty shootout. They underperformed on the pitch, but they also underperformed off the pitch, and there's no getting away from it. Look, I think even, you know, those quite high up at Celtic would probably concede that it wasn't perfect in terms of getting players in early. I think they would look at it, and especially in the winger situation, you know, Michel-Ange Balikwisha. And again, it comes down to who's available when, and if that was Brendan Rodgers' top target and everything. But I think Brendan Rodgers, you'll be able to read all his press conference stuff on the Scottish Sun website and in newspaper. But Gareth Law, colleague, was out seeing Brendan just before we came in here, Ryan, and I think he's basically said that it can't happen again. You know, Celtic need to get their business done far earlier in key positions, can't leave themselves short, and he's actually kind of referring back to previous managers in previous eras where similar mistakes were maybe made as well. So look, players deserve a lot of criticism for the performance. Brendan Rodgers, again, he oversees the whole thing, criticism, but also I think transfer work should clearly have been done early. And Brendan Rodgers said they need to learn lessons, they move on. Time will tell where that happens. We've got another transfer window coming up in January. We'll see what Celtic need at that stage. But yeah, I think for the Celtic fans, it was a disappointing missed opportunity because, let's face it, Celtic should be beating Kairat Almaty.
Well, when one door closes, another opens, that old cliche.
Yeah.
So we're on to the Europa League now.
Yeah.
First time for Celtic in quite a while. So the teams that Celtic have drawn against, if you haven't already seen it, Roma, Feyenoord, Braga, Red Star Belgrade, Sturm Graz, Midtjylland, Utrecht and Bologna. So some decent ones in there. Lewis Ferguson as well, and then Roma, Feyenoord, two kind of glamour ties. How is this squad primed for a run at the Europa League? Rangers got to the quarterfinals last year. Celtic might well fancy their chance of a deep run.
It's, first of all, I think it's a very good draw. I think it's a tough draw. If you look at the teams Celtic will be up against, two Italian teams in there. Feyenoord away, be tough. I think it's a good draw. Look, you're always kind of wary when Celtic or Rangers miss out the Champions League. You think, is it going to be a real kind of come down in the Europa League? But I think there's enough there for Celtic to kind of be quite excited about fan-wise. How far can they get? Look, I think the Europa League now in general is a very wide open tournament. I think in the past it was always sort of kind of strange because you had the original teams in the Europa League and you would look and think, how can you compete? But then you would always have the Champions League drop-offs. That doesn't happen anymore. As you said, Rangers went to the quarter-final last season, and you look at their domestic struggles. I would imagine Brendan Rodgers won't, and his players won't be making any grand statements, any bold statements, but if Celtic can have a strong end to the window and they can keep their key players fit, I think they'll feel that they can go on a bit of a run. How far can they get? It just depends. You know, first things first, you want to get out the league phase. Then you see if you can, you know, dodge that in-between game, that playoff game, like Rangers did last year. And then it just depends on who you get. You know, you look at Rangers and, you know, the one over Fenerbahce, it was like probably the highlight of last season for Rangers. It was unbelievable, over two legs. And then Bilbao were just a kind of step too far. But look, I don't think there's anything to really fear. And I don't think Celtic and Rangers, if Rangers can obviously sort them, the kind of struggles they're going through themselves at the moment, I think both clubs should be showing a bit of ambition. I'm always, you know, to go back to the other clubs, like Aberdeen were pretty well beaten. Hibs, you know, you felt sorry for them, but then by the same token, they had it in their grasp. And you look at the Conference League, and you look at, you know, some of the smaller clubs that managed to get through. And I think that our clubs need to show ambition. They should. And to me, I don't know how far Celtic can get, but I think as a minimum, they should be looking to get to the last 8.
Celtic fans, let us know, what's your minimum requirement for progress in the Europa League? What would you class as success? Have you already booked your tickets to Istanbul for the final? Let us know. So any other business in terms of outgoings? Were we expecting much movement in the final few days?
Yeah, I wonder about Yang. I know Brendan Rodgers was asked about him again on Friday, and Birmingham City. Norwich City are obviously long-time admirers. I think Birmingham City have shown a bit of interest as well in the last wee while, Ryan. And you just wonder whether Yang, especially if Celtic can get another winger in, although it probably does leave them slightly short in numbers. I wonder whether if they can get their money back for Yang, and I think Brendan Rodgers almost alluded to the fact that he's not going to be a regular starter if all things go to plan. He can understand why he maybe wants to go and play more regular football. You can imagine that, you know, this news won't be interesting to Yang and his people in terms of Birmingham City or Norwich, however it turns out to be, and that he's been assured that he'll play a kind of a more influential role at whatever club potentially signs him. So I do wonder about him. Beyond that, Stephen Welsh, still at Celtic, you wonder whether he will get that loan move, or does the Austin Trust injury, you know, put paid to that? Because Celtic right now, Dane Murray, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Liam Scales, Jemai Simpson, Pusey, they've only got 4. Brendan Rodgers' own record saying he wants 5 centre-halves. So it depends maybe on the severity of Austin Trust's injury. We'll see how that goes. And then you never know if there's a last-minute curveball. You never know which players, as Brendan Rodgers again said, some players might want to go for more regular football. We were speaking before we come in, Ryan, about is there anybody you can think of? And the one that kind of stands out is Paulo Bernardo. look, Celtic are going to have so many games to play. You know, minimum 8 Europa League games, all the league games, cups and everything. But you just wonder about Paulo Bernardo, because I think he's a very good player. I think he's a player who needs to be playing now. And on the basis of the first couple of weeks of the season, he's behind Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate, Arnie Engels, Benjamin Negrin and Luke McCowan.
It's the opposite numbers game. There's just too many in there.
Too many. So you wonder if, and I'm not saying this with any knowledge, he's just one that I look at, and I would imagine that there will be clubs out there looking around for midfielders of talent. I think Paulo Bernardo is a very good player, and I just wonder whether someone might take a little nibble at him in the final days of the window. Whether Celtic would let him go, you don't know, because as we go right back to the start of the show, Brendan Rodgers does not want players to leave until replacement come in.
So 7 p.m. on Monday is the deadline. What do Celtic need in before then?
What does Celtic need in before then? I would say they will need another winger on top of Balikwisha. I think they might do a bit of a striker swap in terms of Idah out, and I think all being well, Dolberg in. We'll see how that one pans out. Beyond that, I know there's a lot of talk about another striker potentially. I'm not sure it will happen. I'm genuinely not. I just think unless someone else leaves, you know, Johnny Kenny's still there, Callum Osman's still there in the kind of background if you're looking for sort of backup strikers, Daisy Maida, and Yamada. So I think definitely a winger and a striker if Idah goes. Beyond that, I'm not sure there will be much else, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it would all depend on potential exits. Is there another curveball somewhere, Rio Hatate, something like that? I'm just plucking him out of thin air again, don't get too worried, Celtic fans.
I plucked Joe Rothwell out of thin air about 3 weeks before Rangers sign him, and
yeah,
so these stranger things
these
can
things
happen.
can happen. But I think the key is definitely another winger, and we'll see what happens with the number 9 position.
All right, well, thank you to David Friel. I've been Ryan Rowe. We'll be back next week with a rating on the both Celtic and Rangers transfer windows, and Chris Boyd will be here on Monday for all the fallout, no doubt, from another dramatic Old Firm clash. In the meantime, go and check out the latest one-on-one, Derek McGregor speaking to Rab Douglas.